I think it's the summer of 72? 92. And we're, in 1994, started with the county attorney's office. You all probably bumped into her, some of you. She was one of the prosecutors in County Court 6. And Donna will be doing the state squad there on the problem that we have in our materials. So I guess we'll go ahead and start with Donna, and we'll run about 20 minutes. I'll tolerate you, and we'll let Larry do it. After we finish up, we want y'all to ask questions and get you kind of talking formally.
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Wilson. I'm a prosecutor in the Travis County Attorney's Office. This is the portion of the trial that we refer to as voir dire in Texas, which in French is voir dire, for to speak the truth. Does anybody have any idea what that is exactly? It was for?
Yeah.
What do you think we're going to be doing right now?
Well, just imagine just talking to us about seeing if we can start on the jury or not.
Okay. Well, that's a fair assessment. Apparently, y'all have been through quite a bit to get to this particular stage in the trial process by, going down to Palmer Auditorium and having an opportunity to find out then, kind of like, I guess, like a mass cattle call, where you're going to be today. So the idea here, from our perspective, is to try to be as straightforward and as direct with you all, and I really would like the audit to do the same thing for me as a representative of the state. As a prosecutor, it is my job to do justice. Now, I think a lot of people may feel that a prosecutor's job is to convict the defendant. In this particular case, the reason that the state is very interested in conducting a very thorough voir dire is because we want to make sure that the people of Travis County get a fair trial, just as the defendant wants to get a fair trial. Does that sound pretty reasonable to y'all? Okay, the only way that we can do this then is for us to have some type of communication. Okay. Now you're Ms. Ford and Mr. Bird. Are you Mr. Bird?
I'm Mr. Burleson.
Mr. Burleson, Mr. Bird. Okay. I guess what I'd like to start out is just explain the type of case we've got before you today. It's a DWI case. And I'm sure a lot of you all have seen some of the promotions, don't drink and drive. Everybody's familiar with what a driving while intoxicated offense is, correct? Mr. Bird, have you ever been driving along the street? Well, first of all, do all of you all drive? You do. Okay, Mr. Bird, have you ever been driving along and encountered a driver that you may have felt was intoxicated on the road?
I can think of one instance.
Okay, what did you notice that made you feel that was the case?
She was swerving a lot. She was in front of me, and her speed fluctuated from going slow and then speeding up.
Okay, so changing the speed, losing some type of control of the vehicle, and things that you observed?
She also, I tried to get her attention, and she just, didn't seem to be in tune with what was going on.
Okay. Now, did any of the rest of you all have a similar experience?
Well, my husband and I, we go up to Oklahoma a lot. His parents live up there. We were driving to Tulsa and saying sort of this head-on thing where someone almost hit us, and I bet they had been drunk. That's about it.
Okay, now I'm sorry, I missed the last part of that. You were in Oklahoma when this happened?
Yeah.
Okay, and you said that, what did you notice about the driver?
That just someone crossed the line and was in our lane and almost about to hit us, and my husband was driving. We just had to turn off the road or else we would have been hit.
Now, the judge has already told you that if there's anything that we hit upon that's very personal, that we can go before the judge to talk about that if you don't want to talk about it in front of some of the other members of the jury panel. Has anyone known anyone who has been arrested for driving while intoxicated? Like Mr. Bird, you do?
Yeah, I was arrested once.
Okay. And at the time that that happened, how did the police treat you?
Fine, they treated me fine. They asked me a few questions. They were polite, but they weren't overly aggressive.
Do you feel comfortable talking to the rest of the jury panel at this point? Because I'll tell you the reason why is because I think for people who may not have experienced something like that, it might be helpful for them to know what may have happened to you. Does that seem
Sure.
okay? What did happen to you when the police called you?
He asked me a few questions, asked me if I had been drinking. had a few cocktails. It was after a company happy hour. It was on Friday night. I was, after I told him I had a couple of drinks, he asked me to get out of the car and tried a few different physical type exercises on the side of the road. And he, I guess, pointed him out and took me to the station house.
Okay. Now, has anybody besides Mr. Voir seen any field sobriety tests, which you can refer to as physical exercises performed? Okay. Mr. Daly?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you think those tests are for?
Well, those tests are to make sure somebody's drunk. They can't pass a test if something's wrong.
Ms. Ford, what do you think?
Same thing. Yeah, I've never looked at that as they are.
Okay. Have any of you all seen anyone who you may feel has been intoxicated at the time? Anybody been to a college party and people getting drinking and you think maybe somebody is, let's say they're drunk. Has anybody seen somebody that thinks is drunk? Okay, Ms. Ford, what types of things do you see of someone who has been drinking to some kind of excess?
Well, we go downtown club a lot to do the lining, and there's always people drunk all the time, and I saw an assault there once, and when people get real aggressive, I guess, and especially men, and they drink, they just have tense behavior, just get real aggressive, and they can't talk and can't walk.
Okay, slurred speech then, loss of balance, some type of aggressive behavior. Is there anything else anyone else has observed?
I've seen people get fights before they're drunk.
Okay, getting fights. What about some people who get real quiet when they've been drinking? Has anybody seen that? No? Okay. What other types of things might you notice about someone's appearance? Mr. Daly?
Well, their eyes are generally bloodshot and sweat.
Okay. Now, Ms. Ford, you talked about people who, besides their aggressive nature, may lose their balance, may not be able to walk straight.
Hold on to things, and
Okay, would you think it would be reasonable for an officer to give someone a test to see if they still have their sense of balance?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. What about, what are some things, let me just ask this, since we're talking about driving while intoxicated. Let me first preface this by saying that in Texas, for a while, it was not illegal for you to drink and drive. Does that surprise any of you? It does. Does everyone understand that there is a difference between drinking and being, and having a drink and becoming intoxicated? Okay. I feel a fuzzy expression here. Let me ask you, Mr. Burleson, what do you think one of those differences could be?
I think there's a difference in just having a drink or two and being intoxicated, certainly, depending on the person. There's a difference between even just feeling a little bit of a buzz, I think would probably be different than being drunk.
Okay. Intoxicated in the state of Texas refers to losing your mental faculties, losing your physical faculties, okay? Or it could be that you have illegal blood alcohol content of a 0.10 or above. Okay, those are three indicators of whether someone is intoxicated in the state. Now, we talked about loss of balance. That would be something that you would look at as being a physical, loss of physical faculty. Does everyone agree with that? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I sort of agree with that, but I can just say and speak from personal experience that I think nerves play a pretty big role in that also.
Okay. Nerves can play a pretty big role in that. Let's say that someone is walking like this. That's someone that most of us would think might be, what, intoxicated or so.
So,
What if someone is walking where they're a little bit shaky on their feet? And let's say that along with Mr. Daly's assessment that they have some bloodshot eyes, then Mr. sorry,
Bird.
Mr. Bird, right? Then might you say that maybe they're having a problem with their sense of balance?
Sure, maybe.
Okay. Would it be important to you to find out whether that person had a physical disability?
I think that could be important.
Now, let's suppose that person doesn't have a physical disability and they're unsure and steady with their balance. Might you agree, Mr. Bird, that might be a form of showing that someone has lost their physical capability?
Sure.
Okay. Let's talk about loss of mental faculties. How could you tell this board whether someone may have been drinking to the point that they are not thinking clearly?
Would slurring count as that?
Slurring could count. That sounds pretty reasonable. Let's say a simple test like saying your alphabet. Is that something that if someone didn't say their alphabet in the correct order that you might think may be a sign?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Would it disturb any of you all to find that some of these tests that you think are reasonable are tests that an officer may give to find out whether someone has lost their mental or physical faculty? Does anybody find that unreasonable? Let me ask this. You both have expressed that the drivers that you had encountered were swerving, someone almost came in your lane and knocked you off the roadway. Do you think that you need to have that type of driving in order to determine that someone is intoxicated? Or do you think it could be a lesser loss of care?
Well, I guess you shouldn't, like you were saying, there's a point between drinking a little and being drunk, and it seems like a point where it should be against the law, where it's unsafe, and someone's not leaving on the road. Maybe I just don't understand your question, but,
Okay.
I mean, if someone's just driving normal, they're able to drive, then I don't see why that.
Let me give you an example then. What if you have someone who's driving on the roadway and they run a stop sign? Would that be a loss? Okay. What if you have someone who, like, I believe it was you, Mr. Burleson, did you see someone who was outside of their lane? Or was it Mr. Burleson? Would it matter how many inches outside their lane they were, or how long they drove outside that lane?
Yeah, both of those things. I mean, if you're going simply on trying to figure it out by watching, like observe.
Have any of you ever been driving around and seen someone who is driving in a manner you consider to be reckless and thought, gee, I wish there was a police officer? Oh, no. Does that happen to you?
Every weekend, just about.
How much driving would you like for an officer to observe for him to be able to determine that he needs to assess the situation by talking to the driver?
Well, enough to see something bad happen, I suppose.
Well, the last thing I'm going to ask y'all about is intoxilizer tests, which are a form of measuring someone's blood alcohol content by using what's commonly referred to as a breath test. Is what it is. Okay. Does anyone have any strong feelings on whether a scientific test like that is something that's reliable?
I think it's the only thing that's really reliable in a case like that.
You do think it's the only thing that's reliable?
Well, I mean, maybe not the only thing, but I think it's the only thing that can stand on its own and be reliable.
Is there anyone who would disagree with that, or anyone who has other feelings?
I don't know how the test work. Is the police just do the test?
Well, would it be helpful to you to know whether someone is certified and qualified in giving that particular
Oh,
test?
yeah.
Okay. And if you had those types of things explained to you as to how the test was given, then would that be suitable to you?
I don't think so.
Mr. Bird, let me ask you, in your experience, given all fairness to both sides, the people of Travis County and the defendant, do you think that your past experience might in any way make you unsuitable to listen to the facts of this case?
I don't think so.
Last thing I want to talk about is reasonable doubt. Who has some type of understanding as to what that is? Anyone? You want to take a stab at it, Mr. Daly?
Well, no, I don't.
Okay, Ms. Ford?
I think that, you know, the OJ case we're all doing with reasonable doubt and everyone is in the news talking about it all the time, what it means. So it just means we just have to have a lot of evidence. It seems like.
Okay. The burden of proof in this type of case, in criminal cases on the state, of course, and we have got to prove to you that all the elements in the case are met, meaning that the defendant committed this particular act of driving while intoxicated, that we showed to you that he was intoxicated by one of the three methods I talked to you about earlier, and that this happened on a particular date, okay? Now, let's just suppose that we prove all those things to you, but we don't, for example, prove to you the color of his shirt that night, but someone identifies him by face. Would any of you have a problem or find that you could not find this was him, or find him guilty? Would all of you all find him guilty if that was the situation?
Can you repeat that? I didn't quite get all that.
Let's just suppose that we prove all of our elements to you.
Are you drinking while driving?
Right. And we just don't prove to you the color shirt he had that night. There's some question about what color shirt he had on. Would that be disturbing enough to you not to convict? Okay, so you would have to find him guilty then?
If the color of the shirt's the only question, I don't think that's very relevant.
Okay, that's exactly right, something that's not relevant. A reasonable doubt, the only way that I can really explain that to you is that all of you all here have got experiences that include your ability to determine and reason with common sense. And all the highest criminal court in the state of Texas has told us is that proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof to such an extent that you do not hesitate to act on it. In other words, you would not hesitate to act in this case in making a decision, just as you would not hesitate to act in determining something that's so important in your own life that you would have to think about it. Does that sound pretty fair to you? Is there anybody here who could not sit in judgment of another person?
Judge people all the time.
Okay. It really has been a pleasure talking to you, and I really thank you for being so candid.
Hello, members of the panel. I'm Larry Sauer, and I represent Victor Alvarez. Victor is a UT engineering student, and he's here from Nicaragua. I wonder if any of you know Victor or myself. This part of the trial is called jury selection, and it's the only opportunity that I will have to sit and talk with you and have a conversation. So we can have some give and take, some dialogue. So if there's anything you want to ask me, please feel free to do that. And I'm probably going to ask you some questions that might be a little personal, maybe not. But there's nothing that I'm doing to try and satisfy just a personal curiosity. What I'm doing is trying to see if there's anything in your background or life experiences that could cause you to lean one way or the other, one side or the other, so that when it comes down to selecting the jury, we'll have the best opportunity to see if you're suited, we think you're suited to serve on this jury. I'd like to ask you if any of y'all are familiar with any of the Ronnie Earl, who's the district attorney, or Ken Oden, the county attorney, or any of the assistants. There are approximately 85 or 90 lawyers that work for those two individuals that prosecute cases in Travis County. Are any of you close friends with, or personally acquainted with any of the lawyers or with those individuals? How about any of our district judges that handle criminal cases, or our county court of law judges that handle criminal cases? Any of y'all have any relatives or close friends that are in law enforcement or have been in law enforcement? Ms. Bailey?
I got a brother who's a highway patrolman,
Okay, and where does he work?
the Texas Highway Department.
Here in town?
Here in Texas.
Okay, but it is the Department of Public Safety or the Highway Department?
Requirement.
Is he in their law enforcement arm?
Yes, he is.
Okay, and how long has he been doing that?
About 4 or 5 years.
And do you talk with him very often about the type of work that he does?
Occasionally.
You talk about the type of cases he handles? Does he ever handle driving while intoxicated type cases?
I recall he's discussed some.
Okay. Do you think there's anything about the relationship you have with your brother and the discussions that you've had with him about these kind of matters that would cause you to be other than fair and impartial if you were to serve on a jury such as this?
Oh, of course not.
How old is your brother?
He's 26.
Anybody else? Is anybody on the panel been in law enforcement? How about, has anyone on the panel ever been in the military? Or any of your spouses ever been in the military?
I just want to respond, I don't know, my husband's an attorney with the AG's office, not know if that counts as law enforcement.
Okay, is he in the AG's office or the governor's office?
He's in the governor's office.
And how long have you been with the governor?
He has been there, maybe 2 years now.
Okay. And does he doesn't have any criminal law responsibilities, does he?
He does habeas corpus work.
Oh, okay. Okay, so how long has he been practicing law?
Since maybe 30s, 25 years.
And what types of law has he practiced over the years?
He was in private practice before that, doing civil work. I don't know, the sort of keep our business.
I have, so he's handling writs of habeas corpus on behalf of the state now. And do y'all ever talk about the type of cases that he handles?
Not really. I don't understand all. Not really.
Okay. And so do you think that just because he works for the state and handles one arm of criminal work, do you think there's anything about him doing that that would cause you any problems in serving on the jury?
No, I think I consider myself to be an unbiased person.
Have any of y'all ever served on a pettit jury like the one we're going to have here today, trial jury? How about a grand jury?
I served on a grand jury
When was that, Mr. Bird?
a couple of years ago.
Okay, and we're here in Travis County?
Yes, right after I moved here.
And were you the foreperson?
No, I was not.
And was it just a 3-month term?
Yes.
And did you walk away from that experience with a feeling that you didn't want to be involved with juries or grand juries anymore?
No, not really. I mean, I didn't. I guess I'd be lying to you if I told you I wasn't glad when it was over, because I didn't like it taking up my time. But it's been 2 years. I wouldn't want to go right into it again. But I don't have any. I mean, I feel like it's part of our duty.
Okay, and when you were having that experience, did you ever have any criminal defense lawyers appear before you and present any matters?
Sure.
You did? But mainly, wasn't it just a prosecutor presenting their case?
Oh, excuse me. Yes, just a prosecutor.
And so you really never heard the other side of the situation. You never, all you heard was the probable cause, the reason that you might be indicting somebody, and you didn't get to hear an explanation. And you understand, in a trial jury, you'll hear both sides of the story.
Right, I understand.
Okay. Now, is there any of y'all that have any strong feelings about this type of offense that's alleged, which is a driving while intoxicated? There's some people that have really strong feelings about possession of marijuana cases. They feel that possession of marijuana should be illegal and they couldn't sit on a jury and convict somebody for a small amount. Other people, would have a hard time sitting on sexual assault cases. They feel, they couldn't judge it fairly. Is there anybody that has any of those kind of feelings with regards to driving while intoxicated cases? Now, I noticed, Ms. Ford, you checked off that you'd been a witness in a criminal case. What was that situation?
It was an assault, a guy hit another guy in a bar, and I testified for the state in that case.
Okay, and how long ago was that?
3 years ago? No.
And again, is there anything about that experience in dealing with the system that would cause you some concern about being a fair juror?
No.
Now, some of the witnesses in this case are going to be police officers. And I guess I'll ask you, Mr. Daly, do you think that if a police officer would testify, that you would be able to give his testimony the same weight in terms of evaluating his testimony? Would you be able to give it the same weight that you would a civilian witness? And would you view them, the two witnesses, as the same and look for things such as how they speak, how they say, what they observe, as opposed to just who they are?
Exactly. I wouldn't, just because he's a police officer, I wouldn't, take his word over somebody else. But if he's blinking a lot, stuttering, can't answer the question straight, of course I'd have some doubts.
Okay. And what about if a police officer did that? Would you have some doubts about that?
That's what I was talking about.
Okay. Okay. How about you, Mr. Bird?
No, I mean, I think all kinds of people lie. It doesn't really matter what your job is.
Okay.
I mean,
So you wouldn't give any more credibility to a police officer just because of the fact that he's a police officer?
I suppose it depends who I was comparing him to. I mean, he might be a little more credible right off the bat, but I kind of agree with Mr. Daly. I'd be more intent to what his demeanor was, and how he said what he said.
Okay. Ms. Ford?
Like I said, I agree, it's just who you're comparing to. I don't know. I think I might believe a police officer more just right up the beginning, but listen to everything he says, but would expect him to tell the truth more than someone else.
And what if you were told that the law gives no more weight to a police officer's testimony simply because that person's a police officer?
Is that what the law says?
I think the law would say that, and if it did, would you be able to follow the judge's instructions?
Oh, sure.
Okay. How about you, Mr. Rosen?
Well, I think if you just took the average person off the street, the average police officer, I'd get a little bit more. I believe the police officer probably a little bit more because they're specially trained to observe things. And like say if they pulled someone over for DWI, I think that, someone just going out on a Friday or Saturday night, they're not, the police officer is definitely sober at that point. So I just might lend a little bit of credibility to his word over someone else's word.
Okay. And in that regard, aren't you relating that to his training as a police officer, as to what he observed?
Right,
And I'm not
on the job.
Okay. And that could come into play, but I'm saying, are you going to give more weight to his testimony simply because he's a police officer? Or are you going to start out with the two individuals, like say we have two persons that are going to testify. Are you going to be able to put them on the same level scale and say, okay, I'm going to start out and see how you do? Or are you going to start out and say, okay, I'm going to give you a little more weight just because you're a police officer?
I think I can be objective between the two, but still, I think police officer, they wear the uniform and our taxes pay their salaries, so I believe them just a little bit more. I think if he is up there and says something that's obviously I don't believe, then I think they can make mistakes, they can lie also.
Now, is there any one of y'all, I think you all said you're drivers, right? Anyone ever not gotten a traffic ticket? So everyone's had some type of violation. Anyone ever have a bad experience with a police officer, either in that situation, getting a ticket, or any other time? Yes, Mr. Davis.
Well, it was late at night, and I was trying to get home after my church meeting, and I was very tired. I was driving 34 and a 30, and I kind of complained to the police officer that maybe he should be out trying to catch criminals instead of giving me a worthless ticket, and he took offense to that. He slapped me with another ticket.
Okay. And what did you think about that second ticket you got? Did you think that was fair?
Well, I got that one dismissed with the judge. It wasn't right at all.
So you went to court over it?
Oh, of course.
And you realize that in Texas, I'm going to talk about some of these legal principles in a minute, but you know, in Texas, we all have a right to a jury trial in just about any type of criminal case. You could, on any of your traffic tickets, you have a right to have a jury trial. Those are Class C misdemeanors that are punishable by a fine only. And that's how important jury trials and the system of justice is in Texas, because we'll get, no matter what the circumstance, you're going to have a right to have a jury trial. Did anyone else have a bad experience with an officer at any time, not just with a ticket?
One time, my brother got put in prison for burglary, and the police officers came over and questioned the family. I didn't think they were overly rude, but my mother started crying, that kind of thing. It could have been just a situation.
All right. Now, I think earlier when the state's attorney was talking to you, talked about persons having slurred speech and whether or not that would be some evidence of intoxication. Ms. Ford, can you tell me, what are some reasons that a person might have slurred speech other than being intoxicated?
Like a speech impediment would be something, or you know, you go to dentist, I guess.
Okay, or possibly if you're sick or ill somehow. How about if you're real nervous?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. What if you were a foreign national and spoke with a heavy accent, do you think that that could possibly enter into it, and possibly the way you were speaking, the officer might think that your speech was slurred?
Sure.
Okay. Well, how about some reasons, Mr. Burleson asked you, why a person might stumble or not be able to walk a straight line, other than for reasons of intoxication?
You could have a twisted ankle or hurt knee.
Okay.
Even sometimes I just trip just walking.
Yeah, because you're not paying attention. And normally when a person walks, they'll take a normal step, won't they? Do you think it can make a difference if you're asked to walk what's called heel to toe, with one like this and like this? Have any of y'all ever walked like that on a regular basis or semi-regular basis? Do you think it's as easy to walk that way as it is your normal gait?
I know it's not. I think it's damn hard. I couldn't do it.
And how about bloodshot eyes? Can you think of some reason a person, I'll ask you today, why would a person possibly have bloodshot eyes from some reason other than intoxication?
My allergies, cedar fever, does it every time.
How about maybe studying too late, being tired from the night before, something like that? You also talked about earlier the intoxilizer, taking the breath test. Mr. Bird, do you have a personal computer?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Does it always work perfectly?
No, not always.
Okay. So it sometimes might malfunction. You might have to have it worked on, or you push in a command and something goes haywire and you can't figure it out.
Sure.
Okay. How about you, Mr. Burleson? Do you ever have those kind of experiences?
On a computer?
Right.
We don't have one at home, but I worked for a few years at the loading dock, my dad's plant, and I've heard of people, you know, them having orders messed up because the computer messes up.
Okay. And, you know, a computer is a piece of electronic equipment. Do you think that an intoxilizer, which is also a piece of electronic equipment, works like a computer, it has to have a program, you know, so it can run itself properly? Mr. Taylor, do you think something like that could possibly be an error sometime or malfunction?
Anything's possible.
Okay. Do you think things like radio transmissions or things like that could possibly interfere with the machine and cause it some problems?
I don't know if it was proven to be the case. I don't know how those things operate.
Okay. You know, when y'all were talking about intoxication earlier, I think the law says that it's the loss of the normal use of your mental and physical faculties. And have any of you ever had, say, 2 drinks and then got in your car and drive? Mr. Bergkamp?
Several times.
Why did you drive your vehicle?
I want to get out.
And did you feel that after that you still had the normal use of your mental and physical faculties?
Sure.
Okay, and if you didn't feel that way, what would you have done?
I might not, I mean, I probably wouldn't have driven, I wouldn't have got behind the wheel.
Okay, so you might have called a cab or had a friend take you home or something?
Sure.
Have you ever had that experience, Ms. Ford, having a couple of drinks and getting
I
behind
always
the wheel?
have one glass of wine, and I always have a 1 glass limit, so.
So you've never had that experience of having more than 1 glass. Do you think it's okay to have 1 glass of wine and drive?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But is it okay to have 2, do you think?
I don't know, I start getting a little giddy after 2, so I always stop at 1.
Okay, so for yourself, you think one drink is your limit, and you think that it might not be safe after that. Do you think that depending on a person's metabolism or size or weight, that some people can tolerate more than 1 or 2 drinks and drive?
My husband has
Okay.
4 glasses.
Now, have any of y'all or any of your family members or close friends ever been members of Mothers Against Drunk Driving or any groups that are involved in any type of law enforcement activity or support of law enforcement or support of criminal laws? Now, how much time do we have?
3, 4 more.
Victor is charged by information, and what that means is that the county attorney has filed a piece of paper with the court saying, we think Victor violated the law. And the court will tell you that that information is no evidence in this case. All it is a vehicle by which we come into court. It's kind of like, I think, Mr. Bird, have you been in a civil lawsuit before?
Yes, sir.
And your lawyer, your civil lawyer had to draw up a paper and file it in court, file a petition in court, and that gets you into court, it gets you heard. And that's what an information is. And so the law says that you can't draw any inference, you can't draw any conclusions from that information being filed. Does anybody have any questions about that? Our law also tells us that an individual that's accused of a criminal act is presumed innocent. And they're presumed innocent all the way through the trial. And that presumption doesn't change. It stays there with the accused until the state can prove beyond a reasonable doubt each and every element of the offense. Now, is there anyone that, let me ask you, I guess I'll ask you, Ms. Ford, do you think if the state went through their case and they proved to you that Victor Alvarez was driving, and they proved to you that he was on a city street, and they proved to you that he was intoxicated, but they failed to prove, because they just forgot, that he was in a motor vehicle? You might assume from the facts of where they proved that he was on a bicycle or something. But he wasn't on, they never said he was driving a truck or he was driving a car. But you go through the trial and you kind of figure, well, that's probably what he was doing. But they didn't prove that. And then, you're given the court's charge and it says, the state has to prove that this individual driving a motor vehicle on a public street or highway, intoxicated, they have to prove all those things. And you believe that they proved all those elements, but they didn't prove to you that he was driving a motor vehicle. If you went back in the jury room and started deliberating and took a vote, how would you vote?
If they're required to prove motor vehicle,
Right.
then it's not guilty.
How about you, Mr. Burleson?
I guess since that's the law, I still think it's probably, I mean, it's relevant what he was driving, but I think that it would be obvious to me that if a cop pulled him over, he was in a car. But if they have to prove it, then they have to prove it. And I would abide by that.
Okay, Mr. Daly?
Well, I'm concerned about his drinking. I mean, they found him,
That you believe in your mind that he's intoxicated.
oh, that's not right.
And so, are you saying that you
It'd be very hard because it's a sin. The body's your temple. Violating your temple is committing a sin. I don't believe in drinking at all.
So, when I asked earlier about having a couple of drinks and driving, I can't remember, I guess you've never done that either?
I don't drink at all.
Oh, you don't drink, okay.
I don't think either.
You don't drink either? I still drink. Well,
Claire, why
then,
don't we stop there? No, I'll take the cure here before this is over with. Let's do this as an exercise. Larry, if you had one strike exercise, who would you strike? If you had four, I think we know, but if you had one.
I didn't make any notes. Let me think.
How about you, Donna? One
Miss
strike.
Ward kind of bothered me, but I'd have to strike Mr. Burns.
Yeah, he's a loser for the state.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. Probably Mr. Daly.
It's a judgment call. Why don't we do this? Since we're running out of time, Larry, why don't you spend about 2 minutes kind of telling what you're trying to do, and Donna, you do the same thing, and we'll answer some questions. Yeah, why don't y'all shift around? Okay, well, so we finish up here. Larry, what is it you're trying to do when you're voir diring the jury? Are you trying to instruct them or learn from them or what?
Well, mainly I'm trying to educate them, to throw questions out that are give them cause to think about some of the issues that are going to be coming up in the case, so that they know right from the voir dire, they basically know what the case is, and they know, that these questions have been put in their minds. And so then when they hear those same questions raised in your opening statement, they hear it there, then they hear it from the witnesses, and they hear it in your final argument. So you've got this theme running throughout. And so you hit the major points when you're preparing. You figure out what they are, what are the main issues in your case, and you start those with voir dire. And so that's basically that. And then, you try and just with the types of questions on the law, what I'm trying to do is not so much to get people struck for cause because they can't follow law, but to educate them as to how strongly the law insists that it be followed. And if you do that, when we didn't get into me talking about reasonable doubt and a lot of other issues like that, but people tend to, when you go to that, kind of go over the history of our country and how all these issues come into play, then people just start taking their jury service much more seriously. And they start, when they hear these issues come up and they start thinking about reasonable doubt, they really start applying that to, all the issues in the case. And it really is helpful to take some time so that you don't just have your standard questions, who are you, where do you work, and what do you do. You take the time to figure out what issues are going to be big players in the case, and so you can get them thinking about it early.
Juanita?
Well, I thought that the fact pattern for this particular case is pretty difficult for the state. So, my idea generally is, and I think it applies here, is that I really want to try to identify the people on the jury who are going to be less likely to decide from the state's point of view where this type of fact situation exists. So, I feel like I can only educate them so much, and I want to let them know what the law requires or what it is the state has to prove but more so I'm interested in finding out what their past life experience have been, because I mean, they're always going to say I'm going to be very impartial with some exceptions, but very few exceptions. So I want to find out what is in this person's background and how did they get to where they are now, where it applies to this case. And I guess, Judge D says we now Coopers, because those are the people that when they get back to the jury room, regardless of what they've heard, they're going to stick, I think, in the back of their minds with their predisposition, which they're not supposed to do, but I think 9 times out of 10, you just can't change a person during court die. So just try to identify the problematic people. People tend to be leaders instead of followers, and people who like to use words because they just can never say God. But that life pattern is one that you don't want to have.
Call me.
The goober on. Anybody have any questions? Voir dire, and we'll talk about this a lot in the next class session. We're about to wind up here, but voir dire is the hardest part of the trial to do well, and it's also, I think, the most important part of the trial. So we're going to devote a whole other class session to talking about the issues, and normally we do that first and then have them come in and do the demonstration. We reverse that. But it might work out just as well. We'll talk more about this in the next class session. Yeah,
I wanted to ask Larry just a real quick question about the movement, for example, extending Batson to cover religious beliefs and the general move to eliminate peremptory challenges, how you look at that movement from the view of a defense attorney?
Well, I hate to see it happen, but I mean, I think eventually it will. It might take 15 or 20 years before it happens here in Texas. Maybe not that long, but I think it'll take a while. But I think that's where it's all moving towards. They're going to start applying to the defense eventually. They haven't yet, as far as I know. But so, I mean, right now, it really helps the defense. I can tell you that before we had Batson, it was rare that you ever had a minority on a jury. Since Batson, you always have at least 1 or 2 minorities on your jury. And it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in the deliberations.
Yeah. If we ever get to where we don't have any peremptories, I don't know how the system will work, because you have people that everybody in the courtroom knows are not going to be fair. It's almost such a obvious facade of what they're doing, a charade. And if you can't strike those with a peremptory because they won't say the magic words, then you're just going to end up in cases where you have unfair juries, and everybody knows it's unfair. So I hope we don't ever lose some peremptories now. These things just how it works out.
How often do you find yourself in a situation anyway,
Where
where you just think you have a completely unfair jury?
every time I lose.
Which is often.
Not often, hardly ever. I don't know. Sometimes you see jury panels that are pretty frightening from either side, and that's why you see a lot of cases end up settling up. When I had a DWI case I thought was pretty tribal one time, I was brought out of the jury. And it just, everybody on the jury panel was either related to, friends with, or an admirer of the arresting officer. It was the weirdest deal I've ever seen. We had to settle that case right then after Voir.
Do you have a right to see the panel before you request a shuffle?
Yes,
To see them
absolutely.
seated?
Yeah. Case called Stark versus State, Court of Criminal Appeals, that was actually the case I tried to pick up on appeal to establish that. You have, the whole point is you get to eyeball them before you exercise the right of shuffle.
I have a question. The only experience I've had with this is being a juror in competition here at school. In that situation, they were really antagonistic almost, pouncing on the guy who might be the weak link or whatever. And then they drag him up in front, and it's really a combative process, adversarial almost. You guys were just, nice and calm about it.
This reality.
My feeling is, you don't know who you're going to get. You don't know who these folks are, so you better be nice to them. And the nicer you are, the more they like you, and the more they're going to listen to you, the more they're going to believe you when you argue your case to the final jury. So you want to win them over. You want to get them to like you more than they like the state.
Yeah, and if you're trying to get the jurors to open up and kind of express themselves to you openly, and you bark at them, nobody else is going to say a thing. They're just going to close up. But they don't want to be barked at by somebody. They just shut it down. Any lawyer who does that in a real voir dire is cool.
Do you rehabilitate the person who has to strike? That's where it gets.
That's where it gets to me a little difficult. It depends on what's going on. Some of the judges don't want you to do that in the process of the while they'd rather do that at the bench. And also, I guess the hardest thing to know is when you find someone who is so, I guess, adverse to your case, then how far do you let them poison the minds of the jury? And some people are just going to get a lot of good information in front of the jury in order to more effectively play with the facts of the case that's been found. But sometimes you'll have somebody who's just, whatever they say is going to be completely done. And at that point, you kind of need to figure out how to cut them off in a polite way or how to, utilize that and move on. And I think the rest of the panel is looking at that to see how you handle the people who are out there who are too antagonistic with someone, or who, probably one of the worst things you can do is have them excuse the courtroom before you finish your dire because, they're going to think something's wrong with you or something's wrong with your case, I think.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll see you next week.
All right, thank you.
Thanks again. See you in the courthouse. Good job.
I was always the one who was the least drunk.
It's pretty interesting, really. He doesn't. Hey, Rick. That's the way they do it. That's the trial. You ready for the shindig tomorrow?
Yeah, so we have, that was.
Do we have the search warrant yet?
We're still waiting on the sheriff to,
Just record. They keep on file.
I was going to say yes,
It's gonna
because
say, I'd like to copy
sister.
sister.
I was going to ask you.
And when you ask for it, don't just say, I want the search warrant, because what you want is the affidavit and the warrant.